Hi all, today I am going to talk about the cavalier poets. The cavalier poets and the lyrics and its features. Who are the cavalier poets? To begin with the introduction of cavalier poet, they were the group of 17th century English poets who were supported King Charles I in his struggles with the parliament. So obviously we know that the word cavalier means horseman, which we could see which is present in the English Civil War and was mostly used by their opponents. It is originally denoted this group's political allegiance and social attitudes which were pre-monarchy and pre-aristocracy. So there are many notable cavalier poets which were available on that year, and they were all known as Robert Herrick, Richard Lovelace, Thomas Carew and Sir John Suckling. So divine with the cavalier poetry, it is that poem of cavaliers which is always straightforward and which is refined. That is the main examples of this cavalier poem. To begin with Robert Herrick, he was born in August 24 in England, London, and he was died in 1647. So here we could see he is a very cleric poet and most of the original son of Ben Jonson. And he also has received the Ancient Classic Lyric Award. So he is best remembered for the line, "Gather a rosebuds," while maybe he is one of the famous cavalier poets. As it's told prior, cavalier poems is an opposite of metaphysical poetry. The metaphysical poems were very long and it was beyond the nature, beyond the metaphysical things and the superficial things. But here we could see in cavalier poems, the lyrics was very short and it was easily understandable by the common people. And also it always talks, it celebrates love, beauty and nature in the entire 17th century, which was against the classic literature movement. And also it has been accompanied by musics which plays a major role for the people to understand the cavalier poems. Going to the cavalier poets, Robert Herrick, he is a lyric poet who is also known for his work Hesperides. It includes some of the best examples of Capedum. It's nothing but seize the day or seize the moment, which is first introduced by Robert Herrick. He has written 2,500 poems in his lifetime, and his famous poem would be "To the Virgins to Make Much of Time," which categorized under the cavalier poems. And next, he often refers love making and the pleasure of the human body would be noticed in his poem. So he moved on to more spiritual themes later days by writing on the cavalier poems. About Richard Lovelace, he is another important cavalier poet. He fought for Charles I, as I told earlier. He is also well known for his poem "To Atlia from Prison to Lucasta Going to the Wars." When he returned from the war, he served as a gentleman and justice for peace. He was imprisoned several times and released in April 1649 after Charles I was executed. So his life were also mostly we could see of the cavalier or the horsemanship in his life. Followed by Thomas Carew. Thomas Carew is a notable cavalier poet like Robert and Richard, he is also adequately studied and appreciated until the 20th century from 17th century because his poems were very triggering, emotional, and it is triggering not only the intellectual of the people but also the emotion of the people. His best known works are A Rapture, which is a very great representative of the border warrior. His poems were generally short and dealt with the themes of love, honor, and also the sensual pleasure of the human beings, which we could call one of the major characteristics of Cavalier poem. Followed by Sir John Suckling. He was also called to the rose of 17th century for his intellectual poems. He is best known for Ballad Upon a Wedding and his joyful attitude towards life. His collection Fragmenta Aura first appeared in 1646, and he is also noted for his dramatic works like Algara. Characteristics of Cavalier lyrics. While metaphysical poets like John Donne wrote spiritual, scientific, and moral focus, the Cavalier poets concentrated only on the pleasure of the moment. Metaphysical poets wrote figuratively with a high language, while Cavalier poets wrote it very simple and being more apt to say what they meant in clear terms. Cavalier poets wrote short, refined verse, and tone of the Cavalier poetry was generally very easygoing. Cavalier poetry is different from traditional poetry because of its subject matter. Instead of tackling issues like religion, philosophy, and the arts, they focused on expression of or the celebration of the joy, simple gratification, and much livelier than the traditional works of their ancestors. The purpose of their work was often to promote King Charles I and their outstanding parliament ideas. Most works had symbolic or classical references, which is the knowledge of Horace, Ovid, and all these resources they were able to produce in the poetry, which is impressed by King Charles I. Cavalier poets not only create poetry, but they also created with a virtue tribe, which is very rich in reference to the ancient literature. It celebrates beauty, love, nature, sensuality, dinkling, good fellowship, honor, and many more themes of that era. So this is why we call it as Capridem. Cavalier poets certainly wrote to promote loyalist principle in favor of the crown, and their themes ran very deeper. In this way, Cavalier poetry is often grouped in the political category of poetry. There were also recognized in its own genre with the beginning of the English Civil War in 1642, where men began to write in defense of the crown. So we could also see the ideas not only belongs to the ancient but rather belong to the court and to the England. So this made their writing applicable for the era they were writing in and also portrayed the greatness of crown and the King Charles I. Followed by we could see Cavalier poets were influenced by the classical and Roman poetry. They were also inspired by the Italian Renaissance poets, which incorporates the elements from French poetry. Who are the prominent writers is Richard Lovelace with so much poems, Thomas Carew and Sir John Suckling. The legacy of Cavalier poets influenced the later generation of the poets because they have contributed to the development of English poetry. to remember their elegance and vivacity for the intellectual quality they have offered to the English literature. More than metaphysical poets, cavalier poets were worshipped. Thank you.